As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to be celebrated. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love.
Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden's a play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Whomever you love, whatever path you are on, you are welcome here. Yesterday, our distant ancestors gathered round a flame to share stories and find comfort. Tomorrow, our descendants will gather round a flame, talking of a life we will never know. But today, it is we who gather here, around this flame, seeking, believing, and being together. Once again, welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. We have so much good going on. Check out the West Shore Weekly in your order of service about events coming up and how you can get involved. One that caught my eye this morning as I was looking at it is the social action film, The Librarians, Saturday, September 13th at 7 p.m. This film about librarians uniting to combat book banning, defending intellectual freedom on democracy's front lines amid unprecedented censorship. To me, that sounded like something I really want to check out. We are excited to welcome our guest speaker this morning. Andy Burnette has been the Director of Clinical Pastoral Education at Cleveland Clinic since June of 2024. He was a chaplain fellow, staff chaplain, and ACPE certified educator candidate at the Lewis Stokes Cleveland VA Medical Center from 2020 to 2024. There he received the VA Eye Care Project Award for Excellence for his work in psychosocial rehabilitation treatment program. He is a board certified chaplain endorsed by the Humanist Society. Andy completed a Bachelor of Science degree in Mass Communication at University of Evansville in Indiana, a Master of Divinity at Chapman Seminary, Oakland City, Indiana, and a Doctor of Ministry at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California. Following his doctorate in ministry, he spent a year in the postgraduate program at the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family in Washington, D.C. In his free time. You have free time? Okay. I mean, I don't see it, but okay. Andy serves as Vice President of the U.S. Canoe Association's Ohio chapter and many summer weekends races surf skis. Okay. On rivers and lakes in Ohio and surrounding states. He lives in Cleveland Heights with his wife, Heather, his children, Venus and Sasha, their dogs, Stellar and Jupiter, and their cats, Cosmo, Olivia, and Quincy. Welcome. Now, if you're here for the first or second time and you don't mind letting others know, please raise your hand so we can offer a special welcome to you. Oh, welcome. Hi. Yay. While our children go to their classes, let's greet each other warmly. The greeting time will end with the sounding of the bowl. I have a quick announcement that I'm going to make. I feel it's just important for us to make this announcement regarding Howard Moore. As you know, he's in hospice, and no, don't worry, it's not that bad. There was a, a mistake in the address. It was off by 1 digit. The address is 12417. It's in your order of service at the bottom. Amongst the West Shore family. And also, it said that he will be available open to visits through Monday, but no, he's open to visits through September 7th. So if you want to make those corrections, the address is 12417. It was off by 1 digit. Thank you, guys, and I know you guys are all thinking of him. In our world, many voices are silenced. Many truths remain unspoken because the speaker fears rejection, judgment, or worse. Our financial offerings today Help sustain this congregation as a place where all voices can be heard, where truth can be spoken without fear, where vulnerability is met with compassion. We give in gratitude for this beloved community and with a hope for a world where more voices can speak the truth. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. The reading today, entitled Guest House, was originally written by Rumi. This is a translation by Coleman Barks. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Now all are welcome to come forward to share from the heart in our community ritual for all that is our lives. Well, good morning and happy Labor Day weekend. Thanks for having me again. It's good to be with you all. I don't know if you saw the news this week, but Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps went public with his mental health support team that includes other big muscly athletes like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and fighter trainer Jay Glazer, a big football commentator guy. It's progress, it seems, but it says something that it made the news, that Michael Phelps talked about the guys he can call when he's struggling with his emotions. We have a long way to go, I think, toward healthier emotional expression. Maybe other messages in our society are louder. Big girls don't cry. Boys don't cry. There's no crying in baseball. Where in the world, in our culture, does a person get to cry? Where do you get to be sad, mad, depressed? Where do you get to mourn? There are notable exceptions, but our culture largely, I think, teaches us to shove down feelings like anger, sadness, and grief. So you can hear how radical the Rumi poem, The House Guest, is, and let me read it again. This being human, Rumi wrote, is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Again, how radical this poem, The House Guest, is in a culture like ours, 700 years after it was written. He tells us to welcome all of these challenging emotions, calls them teachers, and I'll reflect on the how in the world we do that in a moment, but I think first it helps to think about why these emotions are with us in the first place. Most of these feelings, I figure, are trying to protect us from something. Think about fear, for example. I teach in a 5th floor classroom with a giant glass window that looks out over the entrance of Cleveland Clinic's main hospital. I look out that window and admire the view of, if you've been at the main hospital entrance, the giant water donut. You know the water donut? But somebody who has a fear of heights looks out that window and experiences all kinds of bodily warnings of danger. They don't tell themselves to experience those warnings of danger. Their nervous systems tell them there's danger before they can think it. Their hands start to sweat, but they didn't tell their hands to start to sweat. Maybe their heart beats more quickly, but they didn't tell their heart to start beating more quickly. At the very core of their beings, their bodies are ringing alarm bells that things could go sideways here. You could get hurt, even when objectively there may be no danger present. This may be the sign of trauma, a nervous system that, when it is triggered, is stuck in fight or flight response. And I want to pause here and give trauma its due when it comes to welcoming difficult emotions. Because just about all of us have experienced trauma at one point or another in our lives. And the way we think about trauma has changed. In the past 30 years, 30 years ago or more rather, people who studied trauma defined trauma by what happened, the thing that happened to the person. So in the beginning, trauma was studied almost exclusively among war veterans and then among people who had car crashes or violent things happened to them like car crashes. But Basil van der Kolk, a medical doctor and a trauma scholar who wrote the book The Body Keeps the Score, who was studying trauma at first at the VA among war vets, began to see that people experience trauma from difficult childhood experiences like abuse and neglect, and from other adverse experiences. So he and his associates started to define trauma not as the thing that happened, not as the car crash or the experience of war, but as our body's reaction to the thing that happened. And you can see how that opens up the definition of trauma as lots of other things that might happen to a person. Our reaction to the thing that happens is where the trauma is. Too simply, our bodies lock in trauma and alert us to danger in the present as if we're experiencing the thing that happened to us, the traumatizing thing in the past. All over again, over and over and over, we get stuck. The trauma reaction is our body's way of protecting us from that thing ever hurting us again. So whether our friend standing at the fifth floor window at Cleveland Clinic is re-experiencing an old trauma or not, the house guest of fear is coming. It's coming unbidden. We cannot prevent fear or sadness, whether it's traumatic or not, shame or anger. We cannot prevent these house guests from visiting us. Rumi challenges us, welcome them and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. And then there's depression, fear, guilt, shame. These are some of the most painful to welcome. I think Rumi's language of violently sweeping the house empty is apt here. The depression that can follow a terrible loss guts us. Shame sends us into shadowy corners to hide. They are painful. They're destructive. Yet here's Rumi saying maybe they're clearing us out for some new delight. You may understandably balk at welcoming. And I want to be cautious. Welcome doesn't mean we're blessing pain as good. There's far too much pain in the world to justify it or to romanticize it. But the way I think about it, there's no evicting these house guests. They just appear. Like unwanted family from across the country, can you imagine? With no warning, bags in hand, asking where their room is. I used to try to shoo them away by avoiding them or keeping myself busy or refusing to talk about them. But I know now that, as Alan Watts wrote in The Wisdom of Insecurity, running away from fear is fear. Fighting pain is pain. In fact, research shows that the more we try to run from an emotion, the more of that emotion we experience. There is wisdom in what Rumi wrote. It's better to make up a bed for these house guests for a time and ask them what they're here to teach me. Let me enter the confessional here to provide an illustration. Will you hear my confession? Thank you. I used to ride motorcycles. That's not the part I'm here to confess. I used to ride with a pal of mine. His motorcycles were nicer than mine. And I noticed that the more we rode, the more I lusted for a nicer motorcycle. Before I started riding with him, I was pleased as punch just to have a bike. Now I felt deep in my soul, I needed a bike with a radio and one of those fancy navigation screens. Well, what if I got lost? I told my wife. How had I maintained a heartbeat without these things for so long? I wish I could tell you I had been reflective and stayed with my old bike, but I didn't. I got a bike with a radio and a fancy screen, and I spent over my means. But I ask myself now, what if I had just said, envy, there you are again. What are you here to teach me this time? I think I would have learned sooner that I have a tendency to fill sadness with things. And that the way to heal sadness isn't to try to throw things into that hole like trash into a landfill until it's full of new toys. Here's a better 4-part way to learn from the guests who stopped by our house. The first is to pause and notice. And it sounds more simple than it is. When an emotion arises, can you take a breath and just notice? My impulse, and I don't know about yours, when a difficult emotion shows up, is to do a project around the house or to find something else to keep myself busy, to go exercise. And that's not the worst thing, right, to exercise, but to get away from the emotion is my first impulse. Can we take a breath and just notice the emotion? Greet the visitor. Notice it coming from here into your consciousness. There's sadness again. I recognize you. There's anger. I've met you before. Pause. Notice. I had a student who did something I found really interesting and he found really helpful. And this is done in some types of therapy. He gave a name to one of his difficult emotions. That I thought was fascinating. So if I name my envy Bill, then I can ask Bill, what are you up to? What are you trying to do? It sometimes is helpful. Pause and notice. Here's that emotion again. Number 2, listen without judgment. Don't judge the emotion as either negative or positive, and don't judge yourself for having it. Ask, what message does this emotion bring? And there's just about always an important message. For our friend who's standing at the window afraid, fear is trying to keep them safe from falling. Sadness may be a warning light that we need to slow down and grieve a loss before moving on, among many other things. These house guests are messengers. We do well to listen to them for a time. So pause and notice. Listen without judgment. And set some boundaries. This is a really important one. Welcoming does not mean letting the guest run wild. Anger is welcome, for example, but violence is not. Boundaries. Anxiety is welcome, but it doesn't get to drive the car. It's possible to both welcome and honor these emotions and not be overcome by them, and it takes work, I think. We can set boundaries. And then 4th, seek the gift. Rumi said that these difficult human experiences may be opening us up for some new delight, that they may be seen as guides from beyond. What gifts do they bring? What space do they make for new growth or experience? So pause and notice, listen without judgment, set boundaries and seek the gift, that they may have for you. This is a form of radical hospitality and acceptance of ourselves. Every emotion that we have is valid and simply is what is for us. We need not shame ourselves for what we feel or experience. And it's my fervent belief that once we can do that for ourselves, we can offer the same thing for other people. Other people may also be difficult for us. I won't ask you to raise your hand if there's someone near you who's difficult for you. Well. Just as we practice welcoming and listening to our inner house guests, we can welcome those our neighbors too. When I moved to Phoenix in 2012 to serve a congregation there, I was just about as green as a person could be. I had grown up way out in the country in southern Indiana, served small congregations up to that point. Now here I was serving a 350-member congregation in what was then the fifth largest city in the country. I had a lot to learn. And into my life came this house guest that I'll call Jamie. She was at the time the president of the congregation. She intimidated the heck out of me. She was a CEO coach. And I would remind you that I grew up where there were no street lights, very few neighbors, and she was a high-powered executive type person. She saw in me this raw talent kind of person, somebody she could mold, which really annoyed me. A guy who got defensive a little too easily and was a little too ready to trust his intuition sometimes. And boy, did I resist her help in the beginning. I made her the demon in my story. She was trying to turn me corporate, I told people. She was trying to make the church corporate. Corporate became a slur that I used in so many conversations, almost a substitute for Jamie's name. She's corporate. I wanted her out of her role. But then, and I don't remember exactly what happened between me and Jamie, but I started to hear her differently. She was a little more direct than I was used to. A lot more direct than I was used to. But she was willing to put in the time to help me improve. She met me for meals and coffee out when she wouldn't have had to. What was she trying to teach me, this house guest? And I'll be darned if I didn't start listening and getting better at the administrative side of my job. Jamie became one of my greatest teachers. And she and I even laughed near the end of my tenure at the ways we agitated each other in the beginning. It surely doesn't always end with a laugh, but so often the challenging people in our lives have something to teach us too. Congregations are a great place to get a little practice at this. If you haven't found anyone who annoys you yet, I have to ask, why haven't you joined a committee? Yes. The folks with whom we share a pew are so often our teachers. If we can get away from it's them, why do they rub me wrong? What does that say about me? Changing them is probably a fool's errand. But is there some way I'm interacting that I can adapt that might help me? What can I learn about myself here? Could this person be clearing me out for some future delight? Future learning, at least. Friends, being human is a guest house. Some days, the doorbell rings and joy comes dancing in. Other days, sorrow drags its heavy bags across the threshold. Sometimes fear rattles the windows. Sometimes love fills every room with light. It is all of it and more. Rumi tells us, welcome all of it. Don't shut the door. Even the painful guests have gifts to give. Even the ones who sweep our house bare may be preparing us for some new delight. So let us be people of welcome, not only to each other, not only to strangers at the door. I think you all are some of the best at that, but also to the strangers within our own hearts. Because when we welcome the whole of life, the joy and the sorrow, the love and the loss, we discover that the house of the human spirit is vast, it is resilient, and it is filled with unexpected grace. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. May it be so.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. Got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. Joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like the mountain in my soul. I've got strength like the mountain. I've got strength like the mountain. I've got strength like the mountain in my soul.
Friends, may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make His face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace, dear friends, to love and serve one another.